I think for most American investors, the only thing that folks think about Portugal is Portuguese wine, or
Cheap
they'll
one.
say, "Oh, there's the beautiful coast." Um, what's it like investing in Portugal, and what's the Portuguese business environment kind of look like?
So I would say, it's an EU business environment. It is from a big picture perspective in a stimulus driven world. The stimulus that's given out by the EU is sizable for the country, right? So that's something to just always know. It's the smallest country in the EU, but when it comes to support, economic support from the EU itself, Portugal does very well. That drives kind of things on the ground at times, right? They have a golden visa program that Americans have cared about. That's specifically real estate focused. So you have to buy a property that's 280,000 euros. The euro has been fluctuating a lot recently, so that's caused some interest. But even for the past, yeah, I mean, for the past 5 years, you've had Americans moving here basically buying properties that they'll fix up and rent. Um, Obviously, in rare cases, you have people buying multiple properties, and I met some of the golden visa holders. So that's from an American perspective, probably what you might have heard about it. I started getting interested because I was traveling here, and then I would start to see commercials on golden visa. Obviously, one of my computer's geotagged to it or something like that. So I learned a little bit about it. And from a general like Portuguese business environment, I can tell you I'm going to a Portuguese business school. The only American there, right? So this has been a real experience, both of adjustment and also understanding kind of the Portuguese perspective, right? Because they have a serious axe in certain industries. Wine, you mentioned, port wine specifically, where I am in Porto, and in certain industrial industries as well. They're kind of in auto parts, auto manufacturing for Europe, and kind of a connection to Morocco and Africa. They're strategically located for, let's say, there's industries that you would never hear about in the US that are actually really strategic to the EU during wartime, that when there's a crisis, people start to realize that Portugal has a lot of industrial power. There's one company called BA Glass. So they are, I think, one of the biggest or the biggest European glass bottle manufacturer. They work with tons of companies all throughout the EU and the world. I think they're top 10 in the world in glass bottles, right? Maybe top five. Incredibly high efficiency scores. So that's one company that I visited in my MBA. And then the other one that I'll mention before I pause is called Lactogal. Lactogal is one of the most their milk processing plant in Porto, where I am, is like the most efficient and largest one in Europe, right? So people might think, okay, this is the smallest country in Europe, but there's a few things that they're strong in that Europe relies on. And so that combined with Golden Visa, and I would also throw in the Chinese shipping changes that have happened in the past 2 years with containers. It makes this region of the world more interesting. It makes the Golden Visa more valuable to certain people who might want to invest here. Um, and yeah, the last thing is that there's been so much property speculation that the Portuguese government has now kind of intervened, and they're saying, okay, we might stop the golden visa. And that's where I think that the market is reading one thing in the news, and then what's really going to happen here is was very different.
A
So
change of pace from the get rich quick gurus. Subscribe to the Real Finds podcast for in depth conversations with voices shaping the real estate world.